Biden's goal of net zero no later than 2050 and getting halfway to that goal by the end of this decade. The IRA is going to surge $369 billion over the next decade towards investments in clean energy, and is going to stimulate even more because of the tax and other provisions which will drive private sector action. It is going to be a game changer in terms of the U.S. energy economy, but it is going to bring benefits for the world. The IRA is going to accelerate deployment of renewables in the United States, but it's also going to drive investment and innovation. And that is going to directly help Southeast Asia to meet its climate goals because of the linkages between our economies and because of our intention that the innovation that we hope will emerge in the United States, in the transatlantic environment, will benefit us all. In particular, and again, I'm going to turn to my colleague from Germany. Stefan, thank you for referring to the issue of clean technology supply chains, whether electrolyzers or solar cells or critical minerals. Southeast Asia plays a critical role in that aspect of the international energy system, and we are confident that the demand which IRA is going to induce in the United States is going to extend throughout Southeast Asia, helping us to create and fortify resilient and trusted supply chains that will both drive our economy, but also feed Southeast Asia and indeed the rest of the world's energy transition. IRA-induced investment, we expect, is going to involve new investments to improve efficiency of battery technologies that, for instance, will assist Thailand with its expected increase in electric vehicle adaptation. And floating solar plus battery storage, areas where my team at the State Department in our Bureau of Energy Resources has been providing technical assistance working with our partners in Southeast Asia. Similar, our work with Malaysia on battery energy storage systems and the work of the U.S. Agency for International Development on clean energy infrastructure in the region as a whole is going to continue to lay the groundwork for new investment. The United States hopes that our historic move and President Biden's historic move to prioritize the clean energy transition is going to inspire all of us to continue to think innovatively about how to spur clean energy uptake and raise ambition. The clean energy transition is only going to happen when all of us does our part, and I'm very proud of the fact that my country is now making such a strong commitment, both to our own transition in the United States, but our partnership with the world, in the G7, in the transatlantic context, in the context of ASEAN, and the very important relationships that we have across the Asia-Pacific region. So thank you again to Irina for providing this venue, and thank you to all of our partners who are going to be so important to this historic transition and the opportunities it's going to provide.
Thank you very much to the Assistant Secretary for Energy of the United States of America, and I think this panel is beginning to really demonstrate that what happens in the United States does not happen to only stay in the United States, what happens in the G7, what happens in ASEAN. And I think this is where IRENA becomes such a fascinating platform, because you suddenly see the different triggers that are set in motion in terms of market transformation, supply chains, job creation, new opportunities. So again, I thank you very much, and this is also my transition to Her Excellency Kadri Simpson, the Commissioner for Energy of the European Union, because in Europe, following the pandemic, the Green Deal, and many of the other developments, clearly energy is something that has been at the forefront of your thinking in terms of energy transitions, both within the European Union, but also in terms of your partnerships with other countries. So, Commissioner, some lessons perhaps from the EU and also some perspectives on particularly EU-ASEAN collaboration on these issues. Welcome.
Good morning.
There we are.
And it's a pleasure to be with you here today to discuss and talk about a region that is crucial for the clean and also just energy transition globally, because Southeast Asia is fast-growing region, rich with resources, and that tends to mean also that they face a increasing energy consumption, and it is important to find these strategies that maintain that growth while decoupling it from the energy use. And this is particularly true in this current moment when Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused global hardship and disruption, driving energy prices high and creating security of supply risks. So clean energy transition can help us to bring costs down, to become more energy independent and of course, also cutting emissions. We know that all countries and regions are unique, and they do have their own mix and opportunities and challenges, and so it might be that European experience will not necessarily provide the exact path to all the other countries. But it is certainly worth looking at it and taking from it the relevant and useful elements. So I want to emphasize 3 points. First, it is important to set goals, and also if you do have those ambitious targets in place, you have to be committed to them, because this gives clear signals to investors. What is direction where we are moving towards, and it also allows consumers to demand clean solutions. And in this light, I appreciate that ASEAN countries have updated earlier their renewable electricity and energy intensity reduction targets, but I believe that there is potential for more. And Irina's renewable energy outlook for ASEAN outlines this renewable space roadmap towards 2050. It is very much in line with what we have learned in Europe. The second takeaway is that green energy system, of course, means a large share of different renewable sources, but to be fully able to use the potential of these renewables, creating a regional integrated power market is a huge asset, as many colleagues here already mentioned. And for the European Union, our common electricity market is one of our success stories. And it has helped us also during these recent very difficult times to mitigate the impact of the crisis and also high prices. And third, while renewables are crucial for reaching our Paris goals, so is energy efficiency. And of course, it plays a different role in developed countries where energy consumption is very high, and in developing countries who are catching up in terms of economy and also quality of life. But for countries that will be growing rapidly for years and decades to come, investing now in the most efficient technologies and equipment makes very strong economic and environmental sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Very clear goals and targets, even legislated, the market and also energy efficiency. Three of the main drivers that I think also we have heard from other colleagues within the ASEAN region will be very prominent. Let me now turn to Mr. Nyam Shichun, the Chief Executive of the Energy Market Authority of Singapore. There you are. Mr. Chun, to you the question that essentially takes us into the challenges for a small state like Singapore in achieving energy transition, and how regional cooperation is helping in achieving your net zero commitments. And can the energy transition institutions like IRENA work with ASEAN members and with members like Singapore and other global partners to accelerate these transitions, create the conditions that we have already heard a lot about here this morning? Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning. So we moved from one of the largest regions in the world, the European Union, to one of the smallest countries in the world, Singapore. We're just about 700 square kilometers, and we have very limited renewable energy. We have very little land for solar, we have no wind or hydro, geothermal. So, like many of the countries in this room, we are firmly committed to climate change action. But it is very challenging when you have so limited renewable energy resources. So one of the key things that we have realized is that, one, every country and every region has got its own unique challenges and constraints, and will have to use its own decarbonization pathways to achieve net zero. The second thing that we've learned is that decarbonization going it alone will be very difficult for countries. Hence, we strongly welcome IRENA's approach of promoting international and regional cooperation. We think that this approach will help to strengthen the process for energy transition. So let me just give you an example from Southeast Asia. It is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. Energy demand is expected to triple by 2050. And we've also heard earlier as well that there's considerable, significant renewable energy potential. There's a lot of scope for regional power integration to bring the supply and demand together to enhance renewable energy development and to increase energy security across the region, similar to how that has taken place in places like European Union and other parts of the world. Now, this is something which has been raised as well in the second ASEAN Renewable Energy Outlook report, and Mr. Gonal highlighted that again during his scene setter earlier. Singapore has been working with our colleagues as well. You've heard earlier from my colleagues from Cambodia and Malaysia, how we've been trying to integrate the power system across Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore to carry out electricity trading. That's over 2,400 kilometers across 4 countries. And this is a commercially viable model. It works, and companies are making money out of this. We think this model can be expanded, can be replicated. Now, in order to achieve that, we agree that we need a more targeted and customized approach. Yesterday, at the General Assembly, we adopted IRENA's medium-term strategy, which highlighted the need for regional approaches to enable greater efficiencies and flexibilities during the energy transition. We think there's a role for IRENA to play a larger role in Southeast Asia, having a physical presence to better engage key stakeholders across the region, to better raise awareness of the energy transition, as well as to enable many of these schemes to take place. One possible approach could be to set up a regional office in ASEAN. And this would only help to increase the level of collaboration and cooperation between ASEAN and IRENA that has grown by leaps and bounds since the Memorandum of Understanding was signed in 2018. Examples of these collaborations include the second ASEAN Renewable Energy Outlook, as well as the Singapore IRENA High-Level Forum that has been going on since 2021. So we look forward to greater collaborations between ASEAN member states and IRENA. We think that international organizations like IRENA play a very critical role in enabling the energy transition, and we look forward to a much stronger partnership going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mr. Shi Jun. As the Chief Executive of the Energy Market Authority, clearly a very regional perspective, given that Singapore's own engagement has become so critical. I now turn to His Excellency Kei Takagi, the Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. Excellency, if I may turn to you, and here specifically perhaps with a question that looks particularly to Japan's role this year in holding the G7 presidency, and perhaps helping us to understand how the energy transition-related priorities of the G7 this year, and your perspectives also as Japan on the energy transition, the partnerships that you have with Southeast Asia, some perhaps of the directions in which you see this moving. Over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about Southeast Asia. Can be described by the following characteristics: a fast-growing region and an engine for the growth of the global economy. Second point is, many of its inhabitants have yet to receive the benefits of economic growth, and therefore such growth should not be hindered. Number 3, an extremely large population. Fourth point, complex geographical features consisting of many islands, archipelagos, mountain ranges, and river deltas. Southeast Asian countries are faced with the difficult task of securing a stable and affordable supply of energy needed for economic growth, while at the same time promoting decarbonization. I wish to praise the ambitious goals that these countries have set and are pursuing even under these difficult circumstances. However, the challenges faced by this region are different from those found in Europe and other regions, and it is therefore essential that ARENA provide tailor-made support for the region. It is important to attain an energy mix that is best suited for the region while simultaneously achieving the three goals of stability, affordability, and cleanliness at the highest levels. However, achieving all three goals simultaneously will be difficult and will depend greatly on local conditions and circumstances. Therefore, it may be necessary in some cases to set priorities among these three goals. For example, so that means we've got to see the actual fact and reality. For example, there's still some inhabitants in the region who live without access to electricity and rely on firewood as a fuel. The priority in such cases should be to expand access to a stable and affordable supply of electrical energy, as this is a humanitarian necessity. Therefore, we may, as a first step, utilize coal-fired power plants if that is the most expedient means for people in this situation to access electricity. Furthermore, it is not uncommon for factories and households in the region to rely on inefficient private generators without any emissions control measures due to a lack of stable power supply. In such cases, establishing a stable power supply should be the first priority, as eliminating the need for private generators would contribute to decarbonization. On the other hand, there may be instances where possible to secure a clean and stable energy supply to introducing renewable energy in such way that sacrifices the three goals by adapting to the particular geographical characteristics of the region. For example, certain island areas may not be suited for a large-scale energy supply grid, but simple and distributed solar power system could be a clean and cheap source of energy. In doing so, it would be extremely beneficial to utilize highly efficient technologies. As an island nation, Japan is determined to support the energy transition in Southeast Asia based on our experience realizing the energy transition on difficult terrain, as well as technologies that contribute to the introduction of renewable energy, such as microgrids. Together with ARENA, Japan would like to lead and accelerate this discussion.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Takagi-san, thank you very much, and we obviously look very much forward to the G7 presidency also as another way of accelerating the momentum, including on some of the priorities and differentiated approaches you laid out. It's now my great pleasure to turn to Ms. Damilola Ogunbi, my dear colleague and friend and CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All. And I think, Damilola, you have just listened to these many different contributions. So from the vantage point of SE for All, where in the ASEAN region are you likely to focus, therefore, in terms of bringing, so to speak, the support, but also the engagement of SE for All and of our UN family?
Thank you very much, Akim, and it's great to be here at this IRENA Day 2. I think one of the most important things that we need to highlight is just the ambition of the ASEAN countries in the whole energy transition. And it's really important that we support, not just with technical assistance, but also with investment-grade policies to make sure this happens. I heard from Indonesia and Singapore, and particularly of the aggressive plans that they have in terms of transforming their economies to more renewable-based economies. One of the challenges is to make sure nobody is left behind, which has been spoken about now. We still have about 200 million people in the region that don't have access to electricity. So the last mile is an issue. But it's also an opportunity to use clean energy through microgrids, which the Minister of Japan mentioned, and it's also something we're looking at in Indonesia, especially with the amount of islands that are there. We have to make sure no island is left behind. Another key part of the whole energy transition is to make sure people have access to clean cooking. The deforestation that is caused and the pollution that's caused, especially unfortunately for women and children by people using fuel wood, has to be a key part of the transition. And I'm really happy that Irina is not just focusing regionally, but is really looking at the nuances of what is happening within the countries. We all know that the energy transition plans or pathways is different from every single country. And you really need to focus on the economic growth of that country as well as the development issues they have in that country and merge it with climate. That's the only way it can work. Another aspect that we haven't spoken about is the risk to people because of the lack of sustainable cooling. And that has a huge effect. And if we don't make sure that that is done in an energy efficient way, that would also be a large issue to face in the future. So that is something as well we are working with the ASEAN countries to make sure that sustainable cooling is part of the energy transition. In all, we find that the climate action and to make sure that we actually achieve our net zero goals that we're all committed to really will be ASEAN will be the exemplar that the rest of the world is looking at. And as Sustainable Energy for All and also the UN family, we're fully committed to making sure that it works in this region, it works quickly, and the region becomes an exemplar for the rest of the world. And then finally, another aspect that we haven't spoken about is all the technology transfer to make sure we have true South-South collaboration with the ASEAN region and other developing countries. I think it's key. I think the speed ASEAN is working and all the technologies they have and the technical assistance and every capacity building that they've brought into place will be very, very useful for other nations and other developing countries to help them having an easier path in their global energy transition as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Damilola. And let me now turn to Dimitrios Papatanasiou, the Global Director for Energy and Extractives at the World Bank. Dimitrios, home run, having had so many of the ideas laid out before you. So from the perspective of the bank, 2 or 3 key areas perhaps where you will see the bank also concentrate in terms of its engagement with ASEAN and indeed with Irina and other partners. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Akim, and it's really nice to be here with everyone. What I would like to start with is recalling the progress that ASEAN has made in the last few decades. We're certainly facing an enormous transition challenge in moving quickly to net zero in countries that have strong population growth, strong economic growth, and countries that have been focusing on doing manufacturing and providing a lot of the goods that we have around the world. So to do this, you certainly need reliable energy. The reality, and we have all around the world felt it very strongly because of the war in Ukraine, no modern energy means there is no modern economy. So the way we view things from the World Bank, especially in Asia, is that we have to make sure that supply of energy remains reliable. So we first need to phase up, scale up quickly, so that we can then phase down. There is no doubt that phasing down coal, especially in Asia, is a major challenge. Our estimates is, for the whole of the world, that if we really want to meet the 2050 challenge and net zero by then, our estimate is that every week the world needs to be shutting down 1 unit of coal. Every week starting a month ago. This is a huge challenge, and it needs to be dealt with at the same time providing reliable electricity because we need the economic growth. So our position is that first of all we need to ramp up financing that will bring renewable energy at scale and at reliability around the world. Now, how do we do that? We have to be able to leverage resources. And the way we think in the World Bank is that the resources are going to be limited and the real money is in the capital markets. So the challenge is how do we make sure that governments put in place the right environment, strengthen their institutions in the right way, so that then the private sector can feel trust in making investments and that the capital markets can feel trust in supplying the capital for the large-scale investments that we need. Just to give you again a sense of the challenge, if we look at what just coal, forget the rest of the fossil fuels, just coal, just in the power sector, our estimate is that the risk of stranded assets in the world is about $1 trillion. A significant chunk of that trillion is in Asia. A chunk of that is in the Asian countries as well. So clearly, we have to think proactively, we have to plan aggressively, and I think the work that Irina has done in showing how this is possible is very useful. Now, in coming back to the financing, I think the key is to try and figure out how do we create leveraging depending on the type of financing. The model that we have been promoting in the World Bank, and we have demonstrated that it actually works, and we have the real-life examples to show that around the world, is that we need a bit of money which has a grant capital source where we can deal with a lot of soft early development issues that governments need support with. Then we need to go to the next stage and look at concessional capital finance. And then we need to go to the multilateral development financing from entities like us, the Asian Development Bank, and that then will bring us to the capital market. The targets that we have in the World Bank, and depending on the particular circumstances, we manage to meet them more or less, but I think many of the Asian countries, which are very dynamic, which have made huge progress in the last few decades, and where the World Bank has been a strong partner, along with the international community to help them grow, is that for every dollar that we get from the grants, from philanthropies, and from taxpayers around the world, we need to leverage $10 of climate finance capital, which then needs to leverage $100 from our multilateral development bank financing, which can then get us another order of magnitude of $1,000 from the capital markets. So to do all that, we need to think about de-risking. De-risking is clearly a set of financial instruments, and we have good experience of how we do that. But it also means that we strengthen government capacity and institutional capacity as well. This is a challenge that has been underappreciated, and I think from the side of the World Bank, we are making more and more efforts to make sure that this is well understood and that we find a way to support governments in that front. Let me finish with a quick point because it's critical, and it was mentioned by the representatives from Japan, the European Union, and the United States. Technology is ultimately the solution. There's no doubt about that. We need to get from the intermittency and the difficulties of how do you deal with a situation when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, how do you still have a reliable electricity system that can promote economic growth? And the answer is on technology. One of the latest things we have done in the World Bank is we put together the Hydrogen for Development Partnership under our Energy Sector Management Assistance Program. We're receiving tremendous demand for support with knowledge, expertise, and financing on that. I think this is an area that we are keen to engage in with Asia and to bring some of our knowledge and support this. To get to 2050 at net zero, we need to accelerate things, there's no doubt. And the World Bank is there to help both on the leveraging and the know-how. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dimitrios. And I think what is quite clear also is that the future is being invented across the globe every day. And I think part of the role of Irina, the World Bank, the United Nations, many other partners is to allow that learning curve to be faster, to be more connected, because in part it's going to be the technology, as you say, but in part it's also regional energy grids, for example, addressing some of the de-risking that you just alluded to. All of this comes together. Now, this panel has been extraordinarily disciplined, which now gives me the chance to turn to the other half of the panel that was perhaps for physical reasons not put on the panel here, but I now turn to a few more distinguished colleagues and invite them also with the same speed and clarity perhaps to comment, and I will not pose any questions in order to not add to the time. First of all, it's my great pleasure, Andrew Steer, CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund, to turn to you, Andrew, and invite you to address the meeting on some of the issues that have been raised here. Please. And
Great.
2 to 3 minutes. I know it's horrible to ask you to do that.
Thank you, Akim. A wonderful panel. I mean, my goodness me, my spirits are much higher than they were an hour ago. What fantastic leadership we've heard. I was struck when Vice President Ahmed Saeed earlier on said, you know, which region of the world is going to lead? Nowhere better than Southeast Asia. And I think what we've heard today sort of indicates that. I was thinking as I was listening, you know, 40 years ago, it was Southeast Asia that introduced us all to a new model of development. You know, smart economic policies, heavy investment in people, high savings rates, freedom of markets led to the most amazing reduction of poverty. Other countries, other regions followed Southeast Asia. And how cool it would be if we could see that same thing happening now. And listening to you, I feel it may well. I represent philanthropy. I have the privilege of running the Bezos Earth Fund. That's a $10 billion fund that will be dispersed this decade in grants in order to advance climate change and nature. Nothing is more central than energy, of course. And what is philanthropy looking for? Philanthropy is looking for leadership. Philanthropy demands high rates of return, not to come back financially to us, but high rates of return in terms of impact. Nowhere is one going to get better rates of return, I believe, than Southeast Asia. We, together with Rockefeller Foundation and IKEA Foundation, established the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, working already very intensively in Southeast Asia on a whole range of issues, on policy design with government, on pipeline development, and on de-risking. Ranging from battery storage to a whole range of issues as to precisely what kind of de-risking. So we're open for business, very keen to be as helpful as we possibly can. One final word. This morning we launched the consultative group on what we call the Energy Transition Accelerator, which is essentially trying to use voluntary carbon markets for energy. One of the puzzling things is that carbon markets are much more active on the nature side of the agenda, protecting forests and so on, in places like Southeast Asia, than they are on energy. And that needs to change. And so what we're doing is setting up an accelerated program, bringing in some of the leading experts of the world, together with the United States government, again, Rockefeller and the Bezos Earth Fund, over the coming year, not only to set standards which are high, but also then to mobilize resources which will make a big difference. So thank you for inspiring us. Count on us. We're keen to be helpful.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I think the same is true for the way that you and Mr. Bezos have added to the equation of capacity, capability, and investment in these areas. So thank you very much for bringing that philanthropy perspective as well to the discussion. Let me turn very quickly to Professor Pain Manakul, the Secretary to the Minister of Energy of Thailand. Excellency, please.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Excellency Minister from IRENA member countries, Director General of IRENA, distinguished delegate. It's my honor on behalf of Royal Thai government to attend the Ministerial dialogue today for discussing on how to accelerate, divert, and pragmatic energy transitions, given the different circumstances of each country. While the global direction on energy transition is clear, for ASEAN, we are moving forward in the same directions. So ASEAN's government had made the effort to move realistic and well-balanced energy transition pathway, aiming at the reducing greenhouse gases emission and promoting the renewable energy deployment together with advanced clean energy system to achieve energy security and, very important in my opinion, economic competitiveness. To achieve such pathways, for Thailand, we are developing the National Energy Plan, cover 5 themes: power, oil, gas, energy efficiency, and alternative energies. On a technology front, we are installing hydro-floating solar hybrid, up to 10,000 megawatt on the top of hydroelectric reservoirs, as well as hydro pump storage system across Thailand countries. We also upgrade our grid modernization and its infrastructure to support the penetration of renewable energies. Meanwhile, we are developing the 5 years national CCUS roadmap for future deployment of CCUS technology in both upstream and downstream industry. So it's quite challenging in my opinion. And as part of green electricity development, we are now actively moving toward a major global production of EV, electric vehicles, and their part. The EV industry and battery system will be developed under 30 at 30 policy to promote domestic production of EV up to 30% of total production by 2030. And furthermore, for future energies, the countries, we're gonna have the hydrogen roadmap that will be part of national carbon neutrality pathway. And for sure, together with the energy efficiency and demand side management that some panelists already mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, at a nutshell, although the road to sustainability is still long, but I trust it will be achievable and within our reach. Therefore, at this global crisis under ASEAN's plan for action for energy cooperation or APAEC, in cooperation with our partners, especially IRENAs, will be key factors. And for Thailand, we promote the bio-circular green economy as the new economic models to encourage all green investment in developing clean and green energy projects to maximize the benefit of utilizing our local energy resource. And for sure, we are open to cooperate and co-create with IRENA and many more countries. So finally, I hope today's event will provide guidance in formulating the next step of IRENA engagement in making the progress toward building a low carbon economy and society for ASEAN. And hopefully, Thailand will be able to work more closely with IRENA to achieve carbon neutrality target while ensuring affordable, secure energy futures. So thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Paiman Nakul. I now turn to Mr. Sanjay Dubey, the Principal Secretary of the Energy Department of Madhya Pradesh, India. Mr. Dubey. And again, please, my appeal, 2 to 3 minutes, because we will soon lose our stage.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and privilege to be amongst this august gathering. I am here representing a state of Madhya Pradesh, a province in India. India, a country of more than 1.4 billion people, with 1/6 of the world's average per capita energy consumption, has the aspiration to become a 5 trillion economy. We are not oblivious of the fact that this can happen on the availability of secure, reliable, and quality of power. However, we are conscious that any growth in energy requirement should not be at the cost of future generations and should be just, sustainable, and through renewable energy sources. Transition to net zero energy system by 2030, as promised by Honorable Prime Minister of India, has many challenges, such as transfer of technology that is mature, reliable, and cost-effective, policy enactments to give directions to both generators and consumers alike, availability of low-cost finance. Some of you have spoken about it, whether through clean technology, fund, green bonds, or carbon credit mechanism. And finally, and most importantly, energy efficiency enhancement strategies to minimize wastages. Yet, as a nation, we are committed to continue in the path, and therefore, the Government of India has to give direction for higher energy generation through renewable sources, has made renewable purchase obligations and energy storage obligations mandatory, and has supported projects, whether they are of utility scale or of decentralized energy resources, through central financial assistance to make them viable. However, as provinces that supply power to its citizens, we deal with diurnal and seasonal variations which couples with renewable energy sources, restrictions and transmission capabilities to take care of the additional generation that happens with the renewable energy, fixed cost burden of tied up capacities, and grid reliability, as we have one single grid for whole of the nation. In order to mitigate these handicaps, we in the state of Madhya Pradesh have pioneered in innovative project structuring, such as identifying procurers even before we start commissioning the projects, risk mitigation factors, measures by ensuring land acquisition and establishing transmission network beforehand so that a person has a plug-and-play facility, three-tier payment security mechanism so that the people who are financing the projects are aware and the developers are aware that they are going to get the payments in time. To minimize cost, tying up with the states that have a complementarity of the demand, and finally, innovating through different types of projects such as floating solar. And incidentally, Madhya Pradesh is establishing the world's largest 600 megawatt floating solar in one single location on River Narmada. These are to take care of resettlement challenges, to take care of environment and social challenges. This has ensured lowest ever tariff, thanks to some of the structuring that the World Bank and ADB has supported us in doing so in Madhya Pradesh. We are committed to have 50% of generation capacities through RE sources by 2030 and net zero by 2070. We are developing net zero cities, developing green hydrogen and ammonia capabilities, institutionalizing floating solar in a big way, and developing pumped hydro storages for storage projects. Therefore, it is our collective responsibility to consistently innovate and find solutions for any challenges that we face today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dubey. And I turn straight to Mr. Yeon-Woo Choi, the Director General for Renewable Energy Policy Bureau of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy of the Republic of South Korea.
Thank you very much for your great moderating. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Yeon-Woo Choi, the Director General for Renewable Energy Policy Bureau from the Republic of Korea government. It is a great pleasure to see IRENA member countries gathered to discuss the energy transition in Southeast Asia, and I would like to thank you, the IRENA Secretary, for putting the ministerial level session together. Recently, the global energy sector has seen emergence of two critical issues. The first, energy security and energy transition. These challenges can be best addressed by the use of renewable energy since they do not require fuel imports, nor do they produce greenhouse gases during power generation. Recognizing the importance of renewable energy, the Korean government has set the clear goal of expanding the use of renewables as a key driver toward carbon neutrality alongside nuclear energy. Although Korea is relatively a latecomer among OECD countries in the renewable energy sector, we have continued to increase the use of renewable over the years, and we plan to triple renewable energy use from the current level by 2030. To this end, the Korean government will ensure a balanced mix of renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power. We also adopt cost-effective policies designed to lower costs by boosting competition among power generation companies. Korean government will lay the foundation for reliable supply by strengthening the power grid and promoting resident acceptance. Finally, Korean government will help develop renewable energy technologies and strengthen the sector's competitiveness. Despite the considerable efforts of the government, the conditions for the promotion of renewables in Korea are not that favorable. Small landmass, a high proportion of mountain areas, and a dense population make it difficult to secure land plots for the installation of renewable energy system. Small reserves of natural resources such as water and biomass translate into only a limited supply of renewable energy. In addition, unlike in Europe or North America, Korea's power grid is isolated, rendering it impossible to procure renewable energy from other countries. In spite of these challenges, the Korean government will continue promoting renewables to achieve energy transition and work closely with Southeast Asia countries to share its rich policy experiences. In July 2020, the Korean government adopted the carbon footprint verification scheme as a part of its effort to achieve carbon neutrality and encourage photovoltaic companies to develop low-carbon technologies. When contractors use products verified by the scheme in government programs, they can enjoy benefit according to grades assigned to such products. The scheme has been successful in driving the country toward the goal of carbon neutrality, as it has led to a significant increase in the production and installation of low-carbon PV modules. It has been an honor to introduce Korea's carbon footprint verification scheme to the IRENA country members. Since we have many IRENA country members represented here today, including Southeast Asia countries, I hope we discuss a variety of options that could contribute to carbon neutrality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choi. And let me now turn to Dr. Nuki Agia-Utama, who is the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy, and the perfect person with which to end this morning's session.
Thank you for these great opportunities. ASEAN has been one of the strongest regions to recover from the COVID-19 with the thriving potential of renewable energy sources. Its resilience in the region was shown in the past 2 years of a pandemic by the increasing share of installed capacity from RE-based power plants such as biomass, solar, wind, and geothermal. In 2020 alone, 82% of the new installed capacity was renewable, escalating the regional effort to fulfill our 35% APEC regional target of RE in the installed power capacity in 2025. And according to the 7th ASEAN Energy Outlook, the socioeconomic drivers will expand the primary energy needs by up to 4 times between 2020 to 2050. Securing economic development requires more robust energy security, as global energy dynamics have shown us over the past few years. And this finding was also echoed by our joint publication with IRENA on the 2nd ASEAN RE Outlook. To adequately address the challenges in ASEAN Energy Outlook 7, a new scenario based on optimization is introduced, the least cost optimization scenario. The scenario considers the cost effectiveness, affordability, and maturity of technology to fulfill the growing electricity demand, including the deployment of energy storage and interconnection. In this scenario, energy storage is crucial in achieving higher penetration of RE and maintaining the stability of the power grid. Hence, to improve grid services in a vertical integrated environment, the regulatory framework is urgently needed to translate battery and storage potential benefits into national utility planning. And last year, we all know that Laos PDR, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore power integration projects, which imports up to 100 megawatt of renewable hydropower from Laos PDR to Singapore. It is a solid addition to the existing 7.7 gigawatt bilateral interconnection and another 18 gigawatt planned in the future. The LTMS PIP serves a pathfinder towards realizing the broader ASEAN power grid. vision of multilateral electricity trading. And this APG is a key regional initiative to enhance interconnectivity, energy security, and sustainability through the existing electricity interconnection and provide opportunities to tap into the region's low carbon and renewable energy sources. One important key is that from our study, the investment of power generation will need approximately up to 1,000 billion US dollar in the next 3 decades. And another critical aspect of energy security is the supply chain, material availability and human resources. Optimization of available resources and development of the processing industry are crucial. Skilled labor has to be prepared for the various type of technology. It is important to establish a knowledge sharing platform among ASEAN policymakers and develop a people-centered transition plan. And for this, it is crucial to have a proper mechanism for technology transfer, supporting the technology development through research and development. Thank you very much.
Dr. Otama, thank you very much. And as head of the United Nations Development Program, I can only applaud you for ending on precisely that notion of a people-centered approach. It is about technology, it is about decarbonization, but ultimately it is about access to energy. Energy has been fundamental to development. We have centuries of that history being written, but we also have now the extraordinary challenge of having to not just create access to energy for development, we have to create access to clean and affordable energy. We need to close that gap for still hundreds of millions of people who don't have access to electricity, while enabling along the lines that we have heard here this morning from so many different countries and contexts, the extraordinary energy revolution that is now underway. The question is, can we make it more inclusive? Can we scale it up faster? And can we make it part of an overall economic transformation? Because that is the story of the 21st century, in which IRENA, as a place in which the world comes together around this challenge, is the perfect illustration that no country alone will succeed, but all together can make the impossible happen. And to those of you who still feel that so many of these constraints that we're obviously very aware of will hold us back, just remember the story of renewable energy of our time is being already written in dozens and dozens of countries. And it begins with political leadership, with very deliberate policy frameworks, with the boldness of engaging the private sector, but ultimately of also ensuring that it's not only those who can afford to be part of that new renewable energy economy, but rather those who will sustain an economy in the long run have to be made part of it. Thank you to the panel who have been extremely disciplined. Thank you so much. I thought it was an impossible task to moderate us through this, and yet we, I think, have seen glimpses of the future happening right now, and in many ways, I leave this panel extremely encouraged. Thank you so much, Francesco. Thank you for inviting me also to be the moderator. Have a good rest of the day, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer, for guiding this discussion, and let me also say my thanks to all of the speakers for very focused and comprehensive set ideas, a diversity of approaches and inputs. Now, let me to convey my closing remarks. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we are reaching to the end of this fruitful discussion, I would like to once again express my deepest appreciation to IRENA for successfully organizing this session. IRENA has always been at the forefront in supporting Indonesia and also ASEAN countries throughout its transition development, including the Indonesian Energy Transition Outlook, which also will become one of the inputs for Indonesia net zero emission roadmap. With Indonesia is taking the ASEAN chairmanship this year, we are looking forward for IRENA support to adopt robust energy efficiency measures, increase the electrification and optimize renewable energy resources in the Southeast Asia regions. One thing that we have in common is that all country is aiming for a clean energy future. However, each country might taking different road to achieve it. Collaboration with IRENA, partner countries, and relevant stakeholders are essential for Indonesia chairmanship to achieve the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation. We have target to be optimal by taking consideration of each ASEAN member states continues to grow. We again thank you so much.